That is a Red Arrows flying suit, and I'm currently, for real, in a jet doing 500 miles an hour, luckily doing about 20 degrees nose up, so not racing towards the ground. And they'd opened the back, and there was just this Russian dude just stood there, and he was just throwing sonar buoys out the back, looking for our submarines. Boom, there she is, there's the Queen stood on the balcony over the Buckingham Palace, and the boss screams for the smoke to go on.
Joining me today is former frontline RAF fighter pilot, Red Arrows pilot as well, and Top Gun instructor even.
Even an instructor.
Wow. Thanks for joining me. Dan Lowe's, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me. Thank you
no
for inviting
worries.
me here today.
No worries. Well, let's get straight into it, because we've talked off air about some of the stuff you've done and some of the wilder stuff you've done. Let's talk about Russian bombers. I've heard that the RAF have to sometimes intercept Russian bombers that are attacking the UK. Tell me what you know.
Yeah, not quite attacking, but yeah, there's been a lot of cat and mouse playing since the Cold War, as you can imagine. And the UK, the US and Russia seem to be the best at pushing each other left and right. So yeah, we very often, we got 2 aircraft based in England, 2 aircraft based in Scotland. They're fully armed. They're manned by men and women 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And we're there for national standby, really. It's called Quick Reaction Alert, and it's just to maintain the integrity of the UK airspace. We only own 12 miles off the coast. That's both on the sea, but also in the air. So every now and then they like to come over and just test us a little bit, really. So you're probably once every couple of months, if not a bit more. And they just come down they're doing reconnaissance flights themselves, and they're also just seeing if we're still ready to go. So we sit there and just wait for them to come.
So when you're talking about someone being manned in them 24/7, someone's actually sitting in that aircraft waiting? Or
very close to. So if you can imagine your garage at home, and you've got your car in there and you're sat in your lounge. If you can imagine the other side of your house had another garage and you sat there with your friend, and then if the fire alarm goes off, you just run to your cars. The garage door will be opening as you're running. You'd probably have 4 or 5 mechanics running with you. And then you jump in your car, which is pretty much already started. You just got a few little switches to play with, and you're taxiing very quickly after. You're based right at the end of the runway. So again, you are very, very quick off the mark for anything you might be called for. Now, we go up against the Russians, as I mentioned, and I could tell you a couple of stories about getting alongside of those bombers in a sec, but they also were there to protect everyone in the United Kingdom. So if you can imagine any area of interest, so the capital city, nuclear power stations, those kind of things. If anyone's acting suspiciously around those, those jets will be airborne very quickly to intercept them and make sure that the people on the ground are safe.
So airborne. So how long does it take you? To get airborne from the time that the fire alarm goes off in your house?
Less than 10 minutes.
Less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're up in the air,
and you're
then,
gone. Yeah.
And then how long until you are next to the Russian bomber?
It can be, sometimes actually it can be about half an hour, 30 minutes, because they can be quite a long way off the coast.
Right.
We can shift. The top speed of the Typhoons, if they really need to push them up, is 18 miles every minute, so up towards about 1,300 miles an hour. So if you really need to push up, then you really can push those machines up. But the problem is, if you go through the speed of sound, or through the sound barrier over the country, you probably see it makes the press. It's a massive bang, windows rattle, they can shatter. So we tend to stay what we call subsonic over the land, and then once we're over the coast, we'll put the afterburners in, go supersonic pretty quickly. I mean, you can go from 200 to roughly 550, 600 knots in about 20 seconds, 21 seconds. I say it's a threat. I don't want people running around thinking, oh my God, this has gone on since the 60s. If people are interested in airplanes, we had the Lightning, which is an amazing fighter back in the 60s and 70s. Now in a Typhoon, which is 3 generations of jet on, we're still intercepting the same airframes, the same Russian airframes.
Really?
Yeah, the same bombers. They just update it. It's just, like Trigger's broom, like they're updating the cockpits, they'll update the engines, but the actual fuselage and the wings of these airplanes are still the same from the 60s. It's the same thing that's been going on. Google these things. They're called Bear Hotels, so Bear H's, and it's a Russian type bomber. And they are just this most beautiful silver. They've got 4 big reciprocating engines. They're all dirty with oil, and they've got tail gunners still. So there's a guy sat in the back. I'm not kidding you. You can pull up right behind them. There's a Russian strapped to the back of these in his tail gun position. Like the Lancasters in World War II.
Yeah.
And you pull up right behind him. He's got this massive jumper on. It must be freezing in there with these little mitts, and he's just kind of waving at you. And you wave back, and then you pull up alongside, because the first meeting, it's always a bit awkward. The first meeting is that you've been asked to do the job, I've been asked to do the job. We're supposed to be, adversaries, but I'm here to show you that you can't just roll in our back garden. I've got to turn you around at some point, but he's just doing his job as well. So we pull up alongside. We normally put the jet on its side, so kind of like we call it a knife edge. But if you can imagine like holding it up on the rudder, so roll it right onto its side, 90 degrees, hold it on the top rudder, just to show them that we've all our bellies full of missiles and we're not here really to mess about.
What were the bombers doing if they weren't just doing training exercises? Were they ever up to anything else?
Yeah, they're just here to. They come over just to mess you about. It's just they're just kind of muscle flexing. So they'll come down. Sometimes they'll go low level through all the helicopter lanes that are taking all the workers out to the oil rigs. Just to mess them about, just to mean that they've got to go left and right, and it will take them another 20 minutes to get to work. Just to frustrate people, or they'll fly at London to show you that they're at a reasonable range from London that could be a threat, and then they'll turn around. And so that I must admit, that's when your emotion does start to get high, because you pull along these guys over the sea and everyone's waving at each other, and it's all like, okay, there's a Russian bomber, this is awesome, there's some Russian crew, that's a bit odd, but okay, fine, let's just sit here. And you sit next to them 2-3 hours. But when they get close to, it's when you start seeing the mainland, when they're flying at 15-20 miles off the coast and you see Aberdeen, then you can see, you kind of see Edinburgh, and then you see Newcastle, then you're coming down the coast, like, right, well, that's the Wash, there's Norwich, that's London. It's like, actually, there's something quite sinister about seeing people, here in the UK going about their daily business. You think that's my family down there, that's my friends, that's my fellow countrymen, and the cynicism that's going on here is that you want to show that you could hurt them if you could. But I got launched once, again, hundreds of miles off the coast in really thick fog. So just like driving down the motorway in thick fog, but only about a couple hundred feet off the sea. So you're quite low. It is quite dangerous, and you're looking for these bombers. Anyway, I got this gap in the fog, and there he was. And they'd opened the back, and there was just this Russian dude just stood there, and he was just throwing sonar buoys out the back, looking for our submarines, like seeing.
What?
Yeah, because they can work out where they are by knowing where they aren't, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if they know they can't see them, and they haven't got satellite imagery in the port, or they can't hear them under the water, that means they can write off where they aren't, if that makes sense. And they're quite sneaky, because what they do is when you get alongside them, they know you're looking at them, and what they do is they start this really slow, insidious descent. And what they're trying to do is disorientate you so you hit the sea. So you got to really stay on your guard.
Really?
Yeah.
Tell me more about Red Flag.
So Red Flag, as I mentioned before, is a huge exercise with the American Air Force. So they've done a bunch of studies from essentially World War II all the way through most conflicts. You think like the Korean War, there was the Falklands War, and then unfortunately the Gulf Wars. But they ran a study, and it was shown that if you survived your first 10 missions, your chance of survival as a fighter pilot grew exponentially. So unfortunately, it's the first 10 missions where you were likely to become unstuck or hurt yourself. So what they've essentially done, they've designed a as near life type war scenario out in the Nevada desert that happens a couple times a year actually, but the Royal Air Force gets involved once a year, and it'd be about 60 jets versus 20-30 jets. So you can imagine a lot of airplanes, and for 3 weeks you just live. There's like fake news, which is probably what happens in America anyway. But you live in this fake world, and it's a constantly evolving situation. So you're living in hotels out there, but you're going to work every day essentially on a war footing. So the mindset is like we're going over the horizon today, and we're going to go get a job done. And you're working with the best airplanes in the world. You're working. Normally we go around the world and we go on exercises. We can't fully push up what we would like to do with the airplane. I guess like a sports team, when they're training in front of crowds of people, they're probably not going to practice their match-winning free kicks or set plays. They'll do that behind closed doors, and that's the same with us. So we work on a level there where you can finally actually, for real, push it up and do all the tricks and use the full capability of your weapon system. So what your missiles will actually do, where your bombs will actually fly, and all that kind of stuff. So they generate this massive war for 3 weeks, day and night. You'll be flying you on missions through the night like you would for real, and that is essentially akin to flying your first 10 missions operationally over an actual war zone. So when guys finally do deploy, they've flown the tactics, they've been interoperable with other airplanes, they've worked with other nations, and so when they're there, it would just seem like they've already been there, months before.
Top Gun school. So is that like the movie?
It is, yes. As in terms of, obviously, it's not as Hollywood, and we don't get to train in San Diego. It's more Coningsby and Lincolnshire, which is just as lovely, by the way. You'll choose maybe 3 or 4 guys per year. So there's maybe 150, 200 fighter pilots on a particular jet within the Air Force. And 4 of the guys from that 200 will get picked each year to go to the Top Gun school. And over 7 months, you go through everything. So you'll strip it all back to basics. So I'm just talking like 1-on-1 dogfighting, then you go 2-on-2 dogfighting, and you get bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually it's like 8 versus 6, 10, and then the red flag missions where it's like 60 versus 40. And it's full on. And so you have all this training opportunity thrown at you, and you do everything the jet can do to the best of its ability. And this course is just dedicated to get 4 guys, absolutely epic on every part of that airplane, know all the tactics, know all the adversary's tactics. So then they get fed back to the squadrons, and they become like the beholder of standards, if you like. And even though there's squadron bosses and there's people there who've maybe done these courses before, they're the ones that are relevant immediately, and they'll say, right, boss, I think we need to be looking at doing these things for the tactics. Or I wouldn't say they're a captain. That's I'm trying to relate it to a sports team, but they're the one that's in the team, not in the hierarchy of the team, but they're the ones within the playing squad that calls the shots, if that makes sense. So
right.
They'll be the ones who say, I think this guy's really good, let's work on him. Or there's someone struggling, right, I'll fight with them for a few days, get them up to standard. There's a guy more senior to me, he needs a bit of help or a workup, I'll go do that. So yeah, it is an intense course, and you come out the best you could possibly be, and you go and represent your squadron.
For the person that doesn't know about G-forces on here, can you sort of just explain to us like what it is that you're having to deal with?
Yep. So again, just to think about in your day-to-day life, going around a roundabout, you get pushed left and right in your car. So that's lateral G-force. There's the G-force is moving you left or right due to the acceleration of your car around that roundabout. Now, when you're flying a jet, you're going up and down really. So you're being pushed into your seat, or you're being pulled out your seat. And with that G-force, G-force is making that happen. Now, we're all sat at 1G, so we just walk around at 1G. Everything's cool, but when you start flying faster and faster and faster, or driving faster and faster and faster, to make a turn, you have to react, or you have to be pushing or pulling against the G-force. So on the Typhoon, we used to pull 9G, so that's 9 times gravity. So just put that into context, I guess. Like your head, my head, the standard head, is a stone. As upset as some people might be at how heavy their heads are, that is just general. The average is a stone. So when you go around a corner in a Typhoon, your head weighs 9 stone. So your neck muscles are working really hard just to keep your head upright. So you have to be very, very controlled with your head movement, so you don't rip the muscles off the back. In the back of your neck can rip quite easily, or you can really, really hurt yourself. There's guys that I know who have unfortunately hurt their neck flying jets, pulling those Gs that can't fly jets anymore because they've damaged their neck muscles too much.
Really?
Yeah. It's a big thing. But it's also just pulling all the blood away. So, as you're coming around a corner, and you can play with it. It sounds ridiculous, but you can play with it. You can be in a corner at about 3-4 G, and the blood starts draining from your head at that point. So if you ever see a picture of a fighter pilot, they've normally got what we call G pants on. They're kind of a green cloth type of jean that they put over their flying coveralls and a jacket. And what happens is that plugs into the side of the seat. Then as you pull G, a little valve will open, and air, bypass air from the engine will come in, fill up a hose, and it'll fill up your trousers essentially. And what that's doing is it's gripping your muscles so tight that blood can't leave your head really and get itself pushed down, because as the G builds, your brain and the blood in your brain starts to drain because it's getting pushed down by the G-force. So when you're going around the corner, it's quite embarrassing to do it when you're not in a jet, but you're tensed up with all your muscles so that you're keeping the blood where it can be, and you're like short, sharp breaths. It keeps the blood pressure high, and it also means that you can keep your muscles tensed and you can keep the blood in your head. Because what happens is, as you come around the corner, if you're quite relaxed, as I say, it's a bit silly, but you can play with it. At 3-4 G, you start to get speckles. And then what will happen is you'll start to get grey vision, and then you start to get what's called tunnel vision. So what happens is you can just see the world coming in either side of you. So you can't see left or right until you just see in front of you. Then you give it a squeeze, and all the blood goes back into your eyes and into your brain, and you can see again.
You give your body a squeeze.
Yeah, you give a big squeeze or a big and that builds a pressure, and it pushes the blood back into your brain, into your eyes, and you can see again, and then you relax and it all drains out and you can go. So if you, it sounds awful, but if you're bored, you know, if there's sometimes you and me were marshalling over the North Sea ready for a dogfight, and you've got some issue, you said, oh mate, give me a couple of minutes, and we go around in circles just waiting for you, you know, just like before we can start sparring. Sometimes just a bit of waste time, just to kind of play around with the G and just get used to it really. But as you get up to like 8-9G, you can't mess around with that. As soon as you get 8-9G, you know, you've got your jackets are pressing into your chest, your jeans are inflating and gripping your quads and your calves, and it's just forcing the blood to stay in your head to keep you conscious for the amount of time that you're suffering that G-force. And then you back it off, you come out of the G-force, and then you're straight back in it again. I did have one myself where unfortunately, I didn't react against the G-force quick enough, and I totally blacked out. Luckily for me, I was pointing upwards, so when I came around, I was going skywards. But I pulled some G, and I reckon seconds few, I was in a garden, age 5, kicking a football with my mum, and I'm currently, for real, in a jet doing 500 miles an hour. Luckily, doing about 20 degrees nose up, so not racing towards the ground, which can be quite scary. And then slowly, obviously, as you relax, the G-force, because you're relaxing on the pull, because your body's now essentially unconscious, your pull on the stick releases, the blood is pushed back into your brain, and you come around. And it took me a good couple of seconds to work out where I was. You know, I was, in my mind, I was kicking a football in a sunny garden with my mum. And then all of a sudden, I'm sat in this fighter jet doing 500 miles an hour going skywards. And it does take a good, right, where am I? I'm here. What's going on? Where's the ground? And it's a really scary experience.
Red Arrows, you tried to get in there and it took you a while, didn't it?
It did take me a while, yeah. I think maybe I just kept knocking on the door.
Learning curve was too sharp.
Yeah, I had a negative curve. That was the issue.
Yeah.
I found it quite a challenge to get in. You know, it was a dream. There's certain standards you have to hit to even be able to apply. So they don't come looking for you. That's one thing I think is really cool with the Red Arrows. They don't go looking for the pilots they want in the team. They expect you to go and ask for the job over a set period. So once a year, there's a couple month period where if you think you have made the grade in these certain areas, you can apply to the team, because they want people who want to be there. That's the first thing. They obviously will then whittle that down to get the pilots they want, but they want people in the team who want to be in the team, who aren't just there because they're the best.
So these guys are the best of the best, aren't they?
In that role. Now, yeah. I'm always going to back up. You cut me in half, hopefully a little red arrow pops out. You know, if I look back over my 16 years, you mentioned, I had a great time. You know, I flew, at the time, our latest fighter. I went to the Top Gun school. I went to an awesome squadron that just blew stuff up, and then became a Top Gun instructor at times. So that was great. But if I was to say best of those 16 years, it would be in the Reds. If you cut me in half, I'd hope the little red arrows flag would pop out, you know. And so we want to say we're the best of the best, but I think that's what's quite special about the team, is that I know fighter pilots on the front line who can fly airplanes better than I would ever be able to dream of flying airplanes. And I know there's guys in the team who would also say that. There are guys in the team that are outstanding. You watch them do stuff with airplanes, you just think, how on earth have you managed to do that? Even though you feel you're in the same team as them, operating the same level. But I think what's special about the Reds is that, yes, they are good. They are good pilots. Individually, they are excellent pilots, but they're not the best in the Air Force. They're just the best that can work in that environment together. And that's really important, because when you're flying at 450, 500 miles an hour, 11 feet off each other's wing, you know, you're underneath each other, you're next to each other, above each other, you have to have ultimate trust that the guy next to you isn't going to ruin your day. And you also have ultimate trust in yourself that you're going to ruin theirs day. And that builds. And that doesn't build normally always from having the 9 best players. It's the 9 guys who are excellent, but they've got more to them than just raw flying skill. If I was to look back and be fair on myself, I think my first time I was just overwhelmed. You know, I wasn't myself, so you know, I'll probably just that annoying. I'm sure the guys, because I've found it myself when I was in the team and guys trying to get in. You're just trying to make a cup of coffee after a trip, and there's a guy trying to get in the team. It's just small talk, and that would have been me. I'd have been small talking everyone, and everyone like, mate, will this guy just shut up and sit down? Like, yeah, we know you want to get in the team. Just fuck off. But the second year, unfortunately, I talked about being on the one of the Top Gun grads. Now, they didn't have enough guys who had graduated the course on the airplane I was flying at the time that year, and they have to maintain a minimum amount to be able to keep the aircraft or keep the whole force at a certain war footing. So unfortunately I was removed from the process the second time around because they didn't have enough guys who had passed the course. And then the third and final time, luckily, I'd sat there for 2 years waiting for another chance to apply to these guys. And I was like, right, do you know what? If it doesn't work for me this time, I don't know. I was getting on with life. I was like, maybe this is a dream that's escaped me. So, and I think because I had that, I was super chilled out. I was respectful, but I just thought if it doesn't work out this time, it doesn't work out. And I think that worked in my favor, and that was it. So it took me 3 knocks on the door, but I think eventually they just got bored and let me in.
Once you got in, you start touring all around the place, don't you? Where are some of the highlights of some of the places you?
We were super lucky. So I got in. First off, I was just a spare pilot flying jets for the actual team. So we went through India down to Malaysia. The team then went on to China. I wasn't part of that, but when we came home, I joined the team fully. We did 6 weeks that year in the Middle East. So Saudi. We flew through the Petra Valley to help Jordan promote its tourist board. We went all the way through Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Dubai, Oman. We went and did a display in Karachi to celebrate their 70th anniversary as a country. We went everywhere. That was amazing. Second year was the 100th anniversary of the Royal Air Force. So we did, I don't know if you saw it, but there was 100 airplanes flew down the Mall, and we capped that off, and that was just insane. In fact, in front of us was 26 Typhoons, those jets that I mentioned I flew, in the shape of a 100 in the sky, and it just looked insane. But we were running in, never forget, we were running in and we could see London in front of us. It takes about 25-30 minutes to get to London from Lincolnshire because you shift in. But we were still on the ground when the first jets were going over Buckingham Palace, because you imagine the helicopters are only doing 110 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And then there's all these different types of jets, and we're coming through at like 350, 400 miles an hour. So with the speed differences, obviously you can imagine there's loads of timing issues there. So when the first airplanes were going over, we were only really just taxiing out in Lincolnshire. That's how quickly we can get down and get in the train. But we were running in, never forget, like 26 jets. You think, right, we're only 30 seconds behind them. Surely we can see them, see London, and you just can't see the jets. Like, where are we? We're all like looking at our maps, and our boss, who's Squadron Leader Martin Pert, who he excellent leader. He was looking out the front. He's like, guys, can anyone see 26 Typhoons? Like, nah, sorry, boss. Like, and we're all staring, and then everyone's starting to panic. Like, have we got the wrong time in our GPS? Are we late? Like, are we in the wrong part of the sky? Have we turned in the wrong part? Like, the first thing you think, it must be us. And we carry on pushing into London, and the boss, we refer to Red One as the boss. The boss is like, guys, he's talking to different guys. Like, what does your GPS time say? Like, it says, this time boss is like, yeah, match. So does mine. What does your GPS time say? It says, boss, it's cool. We're in the right place. We're in the right time. Right. And then, I'm not kidding you, about our 2 o'clock, running in on a slightly different angle with 26 jets in a 100 in a right-hand bank turn. And they've rolled out. I get goosebumps telling you about it now. And they just rolled out there in front of us. And in front of us, with this 100 spelt out in the sky, you could see the whole of Bank. You could see the Gherkin, and you could see the London Eye, and then you could start to see the Mall and Buckingham Palace. And I'm not kidding you, from the East Coast, but Stratford, around the Olympic Park Inn, you couldn't see any tarmac for people and flashlights, and it was just insane. And then, straight down, and then we get over, and then you all start buzzing because you hit all the turbulence off the buildings, because there's all different heat everywhere, and everyone's battling around. And you're in the turbulence of 26 jets in front of you, and then, boom, there she is. There's the Queen stood on the balcony over the Buckingham Palace, and the boss screams for the smoke to go on. Oh, it's amazing. So that was probably...
What does the boss say? What does he say to get the smoke on?
As we're running in, so he'll be like, Red, smoke on, go. And so everyone pumps their smoke on at that point. And then as you're coming down, and that just primes all the system, and then he'll shout, colour on, go. And on the G of go, you change your colour, red on the right, blue on the left. And that's when you see the famous red, white and blue of the boys streaming down the Mall.
Fuck yes, that's cool.
It's very cool. And honestly, you're coming down the Mall, and obviously you're buzzing, and the boss is happy. We're in the right place, right time. The Mall is just packed with people, and you can hear it in his voice. He's like screaming. He's like, Red, smoke on, go. And it gets everyone G'd up, and you stick the smoke, and you look around, everyone's like banging the canopy at each other just to give each other a little bit of it's like a rugby team scoring a try, and everyone patting each other on the back. You can see everyone like banging, and then when he shouts colour on, go, that's the minor panic moment, because every jet can turn on red, white or blue. So you're running in, and you're like, I'm blue, I'm blue, I'm blue, I'm blue, I'm blue. And it's 3 different switches, and it's so easy to obviously put red on. In the reds, you don't get your red flying suit until you've passed your final check ride. So you do the whole thing in a green military flying suit. you only get the coveted red overalls once you pass the final check after 7 months of training. So there you are. That is a Red Arrows flying suit, and you only get that once you've earned it. So on the last flight of the season, the next day you go back into work in a green flying suit because you're another team now. You're not the 20 team anymore, you're the 21 team, and so they haven't earned their red suit yet. So you'll take that off, hang it in the wardrobe, and that's it. You'll forget about it for 7 months. You only wear this once you've passed the all the training and the ticks for that season, which is quite cool. Because another amazing thing with the team that some people don't know is that we change 3 pilots every year, and there's 9 of us, so we change a third of our workforce every season. So the jet I flew last year first flew in 1971, 1972. So the jets are good 40 odd years old, and they still are. But if you were to ask any Red Arrows pilot, what would you replace it with? I truly think you would struggle to get an answer out of any of the team. We love those aeroplanes.
The Americans would have pretty decent kit, wouldn't they?
The Americans are awesome. Yeah, they've again, very different show. It depends what you're into. So the Red Arrows will fly for 22 minutes in old school jets, but very tight formations. They will move shapes in front of your face to show timing, precision, teamwork, those kind of things. So we would want to show you that we can, everything you would think the Air Force is great for, the British, the armed forces are great for. When we go abroad, what the Brits are great for, when we go and export Great Britain all around the world, we try and surmise that in our display. And it's quite an arty way to do it, I guess. But it's to show that we're flying an aeroplane that's survived 40 years and can still do this. We've got Rolls-Royce engines in them. We've got British pilots doing British shows, and everything kind of has an undercurrent of what the Brits are about. So that's what we try and do. When you go to America, they've got frontline jets. They've got the F-16, which is a frontline US fighter. They've got the F-18, which is it's the jet that's going to be used in the new Top Gun film, actually.
Oh, really?
So, that's what the US Navy display team use. So that would be like us taking 9 Typhoons or 150 million pound airplanes and doing air shows with them. It probably doesn't fit into our culture to do that. Our aircraft, the Hawks, are quite cheap, but what the Americans have is they've got the latest and greatest. So what they do is they go around the world showing everyone how great their military might is, and look at these awesome airplanes, how loud they are, how
so American.
It is very. Honestly, as I say, we do 22 minutes and it's just silent, as in like we don't do anything. There's no music or anything like that. It's just watch us. The Americans, they've got like Green Day slamming out. They've got all this like epic rock music just being blasted out, and for 40 minutes they just essentially attack the crowd. Which some elements are great, but after about 30 minutes of like your eardrums bursting, you're like, honestly, guys, give it a break. And I don't want to play them down because again, please Google the Blue Angels, the Navy team. They are insane with how close, much closer than I would even want to fly, let alone have the ability to fly. But what they'll do is they'll disappear out of sight, get themselves into a shape, settle down, and they'll come through. So again, incredibly impressive, incredibly tight, incredibly close. I don't want to take anything away from them, but they won't move into a different shape normally in front of you. So they'll go for 45 minutes and there'll be like 5-minute gaps, and you're like, are they done? Are they coming back? What's going on? And we don't even have call signs. That's how British we are and boring.
I was going to ask you that. You don't have call signs?
No, we just put a Y on the end of everyone's name. So LOWES or, I don't know.
That's actually quite cool. That's actually...
You can. I mean, there's a couple. We had one guy who... there's some good ones. I think the Brits are just a bit different. We had one dude who never went out, so we called him the Olympic Flame. And there's just stuff like that. If there's a set... If you've fallen foul of something, then you get it. But it just tends to be Dan, LOWES. We're very British. And you go and work with the Americans, like, hey, man, I'm Thumper. It's like, oh, that's cool. It's like, what do you go by? You're like, Dan, actually. Yeah, hey, I'm Dan. And they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, and they are super cool. They jump out the jets. They've got their chewing tobacco in. They rock over and they're like, hey, man, how's it doing? It's so good to see you, Brit. I'm, I don't know, evil. You're like, awesome. I'm Dan. You just feel so small. So, okay, I'll catch you later.
Wasn't there an incident where you got into a bit of strife on your way back from the USA?
So the jets, as I say, old. We've only got one engine. So, most airliners, if an engine fails, it's fine because they can keep themselves in the sky with the other one. If we lose our engine, there's only one place you're going, and that's down pretty quick. So crossing the Atlantic, as you can imagine, is quite a treacherous thing to do anyway. Being the Hawk, it can only do about 600 miles at a time. And the Atlantic is a couple thousand. So what we had to do is, on our way home, we actually stopped at a place called Goose Bay on the east coast of Canada. The plan was to go up to Greenland into Iceland, Scotland, and then back to the UK. So that was all going fine. But we took off this one morning out of Greenland quite early, and we're heading east. And there's a line on our map that if you go past it, that's it. You have to commit to your destination. Now, where we were going only had one runway. There was no diversion, and the taxiways were too short that you couldn't even land on them. You would get there with about 15 minutes of fuel before you had to find somewhere to eject. And so it was quite, it concentrated the mind quite a lot, that. So this line was a big thing for us. Anyway, we took off, and there was reports coming in that the weather where we were going wasn't great. So, okay, fine, but let's just go. And so off we went. And as we crossed the coast, we're flying over icebergs and stuff. You think, right, if my engine quits now, it's going to be very, very cold for quite a while until someone can come and find me. So off we pressed, and as we're getting closer, this is why communication and effective communication is so important, and it saves lives. It saved our lives. And so we were getting these reports coming through that the weather was starting to come in. Well, okay, fine, we'll keep going. It still sounds okay. And then no word of a lie, as our nose cones were hitting this line on the map where if we crossed it, we didn't have enough fuel to get back, and we had to have carried on. We got a call to say that it was 50 feet in fog. There was no way of landing. So had that call come another 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, we'd have been in a tricky situation.